Hello guys, welcome to Visordown. My name is Alex, and beside me you can see the KTM 1290 Super Adventure R. I've had this one for a couple of weeks, been riding, of course doing some tour riding, but also because it's the rally model, I thought there's a lot of byways and back roads and green lanes around me in sort of Thetford Forest area, South Norfolk, Suffolk area. So let's go exploring. It's been an absolute blast, but I'm not going to spoil the whole review now. I want you to watch the whole thing in all honesty, but to cut a long story short, this thing is incredible. But let's jump into it, let's go. So the KTM 1290 Super Adventure R starts at £16,649 from your nearest KTM dealer, who I'm sure would be more than happy to show you around this thing. But if you're curious about what it's all about, let's go. I mean, it's the LC8 V-twin that powers this beast, and in all honesty, that 1301cc is incredible. It sings, it barks, and when you twist the throttle, is something else, honestly. The acceleration, 0 to 30, 0 to 60 is just sublime. You've got a quick shifter on this model and it just flies. Before I get too far into it and getting too excited, as you can see, the Super Adventure R comes in this sort of Stormtrooper white with orange, of course KTM orange, and blue decals. In my opinion, it's very, very different. It's nice, I quite like it. The front headlight is different, very KTM. I mean, of course, style is my opinion. You probably think something completely different to me, but I really like it. But yeah, the bike looks very nice. I think you'll agree. If not, let me know in the comments. So let's go on about the R for rally. So the Super Adventure R means it's the off-road specs. So you get the crash bars, you get the knobbly tires, you get the WP Explore suspension, and importantly, you get a rally mode, which you can activate through the 7-inch TFT display. So, just finished a little sandy byway stint here in Thetford. It's the Pedder's Way if you're interested. And I'll put it into rally mode. I've been fiddling about here just seeing what this thing can do. And rally mode gives you a different screen, as you can see in front. And it gives you a different throttle response. I've got it in rally at the moment. You can also put it into street and other different options. As a little bike action goes by. Oi oi. Oi oi. Loads of bikes out today. And also it allows you to adjust the slip. And using the cruise control buttons on the side here, plus and minus, you can adjust it to give you as much slip, so basically unhindered, and basically control the slip in one. So if you're on a little sandy trail and you don't want that back end coming out, you can flick it into one, and on the fly, as you go onto maybe a dirt path or something like that, where you want the back end coming out, and when you want to go sideways, you can put it into 6, which is cool. In any case, rally mode is an additional extra, I believe, from KTM. It would be nice for rally mode to be unlocked as standard. Whether or not it is, I'm not too sure, but yeah, good fun. The V-twin itself is 160 brake horsepower with 138 Newton meters of torque at its peak. It's a 75-degree V-twin and it's 1.6 kilograms lighter according to KTM. And whilst on road, this is fantastic. This is great fun. You can twist the throttle in sports mode where there's no intervention and, well, a little bit of intervention, but the minimum, and it absolutely flies. When you're going through the short gearing, because of course it's a V-twin, first, second, third, flicking through those and you're up to 60 before you know it. And then when you start to go into 4th and 5th gear and you're opening the throttle all the way, getting to the higher revs, it just feels like it just gets more power out of nowhere. You've sort of got a really steady and smooth torque and power curve that just sort of continues off into space. And as I say, when you're in, say, 5th gear at 70 miles an hour and you give the throttle a twist, it actually starts to leap up. It's really good fun, in all honesty. 6th gear is more of an overdrive gear, so say you're cruising at 70, 80 miles an hour and you flick it into 6th, the revs drop considerably, you're cruising, there's not much vibrations going on, and it's just a nice place to be. It's a 23-litre tank, and you get around about 200 miles of range. The fuel gauge on the actual bike itself is quite confusing because you fill it up and it sort of remembers what you've been doing before. So if you've been hooning it about, it will say, oh, you're going to get 100 miles out of this tank, and you're thinking, hang on, I've just filled up 23 litres and I'm going to get 100 miles. But it just sort of fluctuates as you ride. Each manufacturer tends to do the whole fuel range gauge differently. With Kawasaki, for example, you get like a plus symbol and it's like, yeah, you're going to get this plus a little bit. With KTM, it seems to just throw a dart at a board and say, I'm going to say 130 miles today. Doesn't really help. But I mean, 200 miles out of the 23 litre tank is pretty good going. You probably push it to 220 miles if you're doing a lot of long distance touring, maybe you and your partner. Of course, it then depends how much weight you've got, I'm not going to jump into that. But in terms of range, it's good. If you're looking for a bike that can be on road and going off-road as like a daily adventure rider, maybe going into some towns and cities, probably a good shout. Whilst I mentioned the fuel tank as well, the fuel tank has been lowered a little bit to keep the centre of gravity a little bit lower, and it's like down the sides as well. So you've got a 3-part compartment for the fuel, of course the top and then down the sides. Whilst I'm talking about the geometries and stuff like that, you can see at the front it's a twin radiator rather than one. And when I was reading through what KTM have been up to in the engineer room, apparently the way that they've done the radiator, it actually directs some air into the rider. So if you're riding around on a hot, sweaty day, you feel the air come to you. And on one Sunday, when it was actually getting a little bit sweaty and I was doing some byway riding, I didn't feel as hot as I thought I would do. So maybe it was doing it subliminally. The gearing itself, as I mentioned, is quite short. You've got Formula One Tech pistons, which I noted down because I was like, Formula One Tech pistons? Incredible. 6th gear overdrive, I've already mentioned, is a ride-by-wire throttle with a slipper clutch. So in terms of application of the throttle, it is a little bit jerky when you're, say, 2nd gear and you're cruising around at 20. If you apply the throttle, there's always that little bit of a lurch, but you know, it's not too bad. Also, I've literally just written here, exhaust is barky. When you open this thing up, you're probably not going to hear it so well on camera, but when you open this up, it absolutely screams and it's delightful. Now, as I just said before I get into the byway bit, there's this one last bit I wanted to mention. Now, the bike itself is quite heavy. It's 220 kilograms dry. So you add your fluids, you add your fuel, you're probably talking around, at a pure guess, 240 kilograms, maybe? Someone have a look. I mean, KTM would just publish their dry weight, which a lot of manufacturers do because that's what the bike weighs, not the fuel, But if you're a shorter rider like Toad, bless him, if you were to topple over on this, you've got an 880mm seat. It's a really big, heavy bike, in my opinion. And if you're on a back road byway, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a trouble to pick up, I can't lie. There was some sandy bits. I'll have you know I didn't drop it at any point, but there were some sandy bits when I was riding in Thetford that I was thinking, if I drop this bike, it's really narrow here. How am I going to get any leverage to pick this bike up and continue on? The point here is that the seat itself for me is a 6'3" rider, nice and comfortable, really happy with that. But also, if you're a shorter rider, just give it a test ride first. They say that the seat is 10mm shorter than it was before. 880mm is pretty much one of the tallest seat heights out there. So yeah, just consider that. So next point on the byway tour is the suspension. The WP Explore suspension is absolutely sublime, I've got to say. You can adjust it manually and you've got a little sticker inside the sort of front fairing bit, and it gives you some recommended settings to play about with. So it's like if you're doing some off-road stuff, then put it to this. Basically, you can adjust the suspension and make it a little bit softer for the preload compression. But at no point when I was riding around did I feel like this suspension was causing me problems. If anything, it was helping me out so much. The slip control you adjust with the cruise control button, so you've got the plus and minus, and that on the fly will adjust how much slip you want. So just for argument's sake, you're riding along a nice little trail, gets a bit sandy and you want less slip to mess around with, you can adjust the slip so that it doesn't allow the back wheel to go out as much via the 6-axis IMU. And that's quite handy to just do on the fly, really handy. Oh, also, yeah, the spec for the suspension is 48mm as the forks at the front. You've got a rear shock, both manually adjustable, not electronic. But yeah, nice and easy to adjust what you need to out of those. Whilst I'm talking about a bit of spec, you've got Brembo brakes on this, front and rear, twin disc at the front, 320mm as the front discs, and you've got 267mm rear. It's a 6-axis IMU as well, so cornering ABS, and you've got the rear ABS, which is switchable. And in all honesty, the electronic suite on this is really smart. It really feels like it helps you out on the road, off-road, yeah, helps you out a lot. Also, just to mention, in the suite of the 6-axis IMU is motor slip regulation, stability control and traction control as well, which you can adjust and play with in the settings. So yeah, I've already mentioned the TFT screen, but it's a very clear, very nice screen to play with. In terms of operating the sort of switch control gear, you've got a little 4-button thing with the press that you can press to do stuff. You've also got a back button, you've got cruise control, you've got a favourites button which you can flick. It's like down for C1 and up for C2, and that can be changed between what you want to do. So I've got it at C1 is change rider mode and C2 is change the ABS, I believe. But I will say the electronic suite itself is superb. I really enjoy it. Sometimes you change the rider mode and there's like a fancy little display that sort of comes up and you sort of press it, wait for it to happen and then do it. It's tour ready, of course, because you've got an adjustable screen which goes up a tiny little bit. As you can see, I've got a £100 accessory on top, which is that tiny little deflector plate, which does quite a lot in all honesty. I did take it off just to see what it was like, and it was okay, but there was a little bit of buffeting. Put that screen on, it just felt like it could go right over my head. In terms of rideability and how this thing handles off-road and on-road, it feels super nimble. It feels like it's exceeding its weight category. It's 230 kilograms, just to cut a long story short, and it feels incredibly nimble. I haven't ridden pillion on this one for too long, it was only down the road, but it just feels incredible in terms of going into corners, and even with knobbly tyres on, it just having it. One thing I did find as well, just to really quickly mention, is when I went out on a night ride, the light itself was really low, and I was thinking, how am I going to see anything here? The full beam was fine, but dip beam, I just couldn't see anything at all. It was like there was someone holding a playing card right across the light, and there was no bleed from the light itself. I stopped, had a look, and there's actually a little nozzle that you can twist, which is under the sort of TFT area, and you can just control it to just level it out. So if you're adjusting the suspension, if you're carrying a heavier load, if you've had a big meal, you can adjust the light to just do what you want, and it's really easy to do it. So highly recommend riding with lights on. Oh, one thing that I haven't actually mentioned yet is that there's hill hold control on this bike. Now the hill hold control, in theory, fantastic. You stop on a hill, press the rear brake and you can sit there. But it feels like this only activates for about 10 seconds and then it turns off and you're going backwards again. And at which point I'm thinking, well, I'll just sit here with my foot on the brake. I don't need to have a hill hold control if it goes off so quickly. And then when you park up on a hill and you're in, say, first gear, you pull in the clutch and the bike's not moving anywhere because the hill hold has came on and it's stayed on. In theory, I guess. It doesn't really make any sense to me. It's very handy, don't get me wrong, but it was just a little bit like, oh, that's interesting. So I've been rambling on for quite a bit, and to cut a long story short, I've really enjoyed riding this KTM 1290 Super Adventure R. Quite a word soup of a name. Whether you're looking for a bike that's going to be an on-road tourer that you can take down a byway, or just like a dedicated adventure bike, I think this ticks so many boxes. The WP suspension is superb. The V-twin is an absolute peach to work with, and it sounds ridiculous. All of the electronics and the electronic suite, with the phone connectivity, with the favourite button for flicking that around, with the rider modes, with all of the 6-axis IMU, with the traction control and all of this stuff. It just feels like this is ticking loads and loads and loads of boxes, and for £16,649 at current price anyway, that feels like quite a good bargain in terms of what you're getting. If I was looking for an all-in-one bike, I could ride into town, I could go on long distance tours, I could take on a Sunday byway blast, I think I'd definitely be considering giving this at least a test ride if I was you, or just jumping out and buying it, because it's been great fun. There's no heated grips as standard, they're £180 as an extra, and I feel like a top spec R model 1290 Super Adventure should come with heated grips as standard. I'm being really picky there, but yeah. So I think I've said a lot of things about what I like, what I dislike about the bike, but just to cut a long story short, this thing's superb. Really enjoyed having it. It's been a great adventure bike, byway blaster, happy days. If you want a full written review where my thoughts are a little bit more coherent perhaps, go to Visordown.com, have a little look on there, see some pictures. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Leave a comment down below on what you think about the bike and whether you think this is the adventure bike to go for. If there's an alternative option, maybe the Tiger 1200, maybe the BMW GS, maybe the Yamaha 700 Tenere World Raid. I mean, there's a lot of adventure bikes out there nowadays because they're a very popular machine. The Honda Africa Twin, I had that for a bit, absolutely loved it as well. If you're going to push me, I know you're thinking it, which one do you prefer out of this and the Africa Twin? I think I'm going to have to say this, and I absolutely loved the Africa Twin, but this just ticks all of the boxes for me. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. But yeah, thanks very much for watching. Leave a comment down below, as I said. Like the video, subscribe to Visordown if you haven't already. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. I've just been having a great day filming and riding, so yeah, envy me, I guess. But have a great day. I'll see you soon. Ciao.